I have more than once used a VPN while I was broadcasting. My computer's a lot faster than the laptop that I used to use to do these videos. It's always done fine before, but I'm losing signal, so I had to turn the VPN off for now. Uh, Probably shouldn't announce that, huh? Well, anyway, hopefully some of you will rejoin that was just back on before I lost signal. We are, of course, talking about the real reason for impeachment. And we're talking about how the whole government is run by a pedophile network. The conclusion is that they're all in on the same con together. And then we're going to go back and support the con by explaining how all these people are in on it. And we were talking briefly about abortion, about how Kavanaugh and Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, a man who has had I think it was three women accuse him of rape and gangbanging in college. And Neil Gorsuch, who was appointed by President Trump, whose doctoral thesis was on the morality of assisted suicide. Hello again, Kristen. Thanks for coming back. So what are the chances that abortion would ever be ended in our generation by a Supreme Court consisting of rapists and those who believe in assisted suicide, appointed by our pretend hero, Donald Trump, our pretend flag waver, who just so happens to be born on the same day as Flag Day, if that's even true. You know, they can change these things. And it may be, I don't know, but it sure is suspicious how they set him up for this, isn't it? So they're all in on the same con together. Let's look at our truthers that we consider the people who are supposed to be bringing us the truth. Let's look at Julian Assange. Did you know that Julian Assange is a convicted, or well, he's not convicted, he didn't show up for court, but that he was accused of pedophilia, and he ran from Switzerland from charges? And we made him our truther? And I want you to know that a lot of these things, these are not all things that I think of. I do a lot of talking to Hugh, and Hugh really gets this stuff better than I do. So most of what I say is a lot of what I picked up from listening to Hugh. But I do make a lot of notes. Just to go on a little bit for a minute. Hey, Kirk, how you doing? Just to talk a little bit, just for a moment, about myself. I don't want to detract or rabbit trail too much, but just for a second. Those who know me know I have that INTJ personality, where we don't really think, like people say, that we think we know more than everybody. It's not really like that. We don't believe that we have a capacity that's smarter than anybody else. What we do believe is that when we find something that we're interested in, we tend to be the most informed about it because we've invested more of our mental energy than average people would normally do. To give you an example, in the last 2 years, I'm going to turn my camera here for a moment. You see this stack of paper here? That's, but that's how many notes I've made in the last 2 years on topics that interest me, just because I sit down and I'm not in a college class. That's what I write down. And, that's why I do take the time and the energy to learn these topics before I report on them as best I can. But I have people like Hugh, who is a savant, who understands and who has lived this, has lived his entire life under the persecution of the pedo gangs. Yeah, Kristen, abortion is wrong, period. And it's unfortunate that they've got us in a box. They've got us where that if we say something against Trump, well, you must be a Democrat. Or if you say something against a Democrat, well, you must be a Republican. Now, here's the truth, Kristen, and everyone else. You don't have to be either one. You may have to register as one depending on the state if you want to vote in the primaries, but you don't have to be one or the other. That's the lie and the trap that they put you in. In fact, when I went recently to the anti-war rally at City Park here in our town, just to hear about 2 weeks ago or so, there was one side that was wanting to end the war, another side that wanted to go to war, and they had an open mic. And so when I went to take a turn to say something about it, I trashed one side. I trashed the Democratic side because the Democratic side only wanted to end war when Trump is president. And I told him, I said, this is an obvious lie that you're not being honest with yourselves. I said, you don't want to end war unless Trump is president, because when Clinton was bombing Christians in Serbia, you could have cared less. When Barack Obama was carrying on Bush's war for 8 years, you could have cared less. But now Trump is president, and all of a sudden you care about people who die. While at the same time, you don't think that people should, you don't care that people die if they're innocent, unborn people. But somehow you're supposed to care about innocent lives on the other side of the world. Yeah, right. We see what you're doing, and this side sees what you're doing. Then I turned around and I told the other side that they're a big con too. And just being for Trump and for going to war and killing people around the world when mostly it's innocent people around the world that we're bombing is not okay. So I'm against both sides. And Kristen, of course, I'm not saying anything against you particularly. I'm just, I told him up front, I said, I would be right down the middle. I said, I'll either make both of you happy or both of you mad at me. And of course, what is the first thing that both sides say when you think outside the box and you don't go from one side to the other automatically? You see, in their minds, if you're not their side, then you must be the other side, because if they had missed anything, then surely the other side would have picked it up. See, they're already trained to think that the only two legitimate sides to any story is their side and the exact opposite. They've already been trained and programmed to think that there's only two choices. And if you think for yourself, then you are, of course, what's the word? A conspiracy theorist. And what were both sides telling me? Oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. Because I told them the government's run by a pedophile group, which is what I'm talking about today. And it's not hard to see that when you see Justice Kavanaugh, who's a rapist. Neil Gorsuch, who's also appointed by Trump, who believes in assisted suicide. Well, why are they programmed to love death? These are people who have made their entire lives about killing people and about thinking of other people as less than human. And somehow they're going to end abortion. But Trump gets in a situation with impeachment, and all of a sudden, after 4 years, he shows up at the right to life. Well, what about the last 3 years? You don't see the con there. You don't see how he's lying. Oh, impeachment's up, and all of a sudden, now he cares about life. Well, he didn't appoint 2 Supreme Court justices that cared about it. And we're supposed to believe this lie? How dumb are we? How gullible are we, America? And then we have Julian Assange that we've made our truther, who was convicted or charged with pedophilia, rather, and didn't show up to court and ran. And he's supposed to be our truther. Like Hugh always says, WikiLeaks. What is wiki? Well, it's the word for a witch, right? Now, yeah, they are witching us. They are putting a spell on the people. Then you see somebody like Alex Jones, and we think surely Alex Jones is a good guy, right? He's out telling us the truth. Isn't he? Is Alex Jones telling us the truth? Go look up after Sandy Hook how Alex Jones sent child porn to the victims of Sandy Hook. Now, a lot of people will say, and I thought for a long time that Sandy Hook didn't happen. However, Hugh understands these things at a level that none of us particularly can. And he says it really did happen. Had it not been for what he said, I would tell you that I didn't think it happened. And that was my conclusion. Think about how Alex Jones lied to us about the Georgia Guidestones. I posted this on my page yesterday, I think it was. And I posted it on a bunch of other pages as well. Now, the Georgia Guidestones do have 10 commandments or suggestions, if you will, written in a number of languages on a monument that, like Stonehenge, could last for thousands of years, and that is key to understanding it. On that monument, one of the suggestions that has been trumpeted by Alex Jones is the suggestion that the world's population should be maintained under 500 million people. Now, had I seen that only before, I thought that was a New World Order speech about how they wanted to kill everyone. However, I have information, firsthand information from people responsible for putting it up, that it had nothing to do with the New World Order. That there's nothing in that that suggests killing people. Now, a firsthand account is vastly more valuable. Thank you, Clifford, for noticing that. Is vastly more valuable than all the secondhand information that you're receiving that originated with Alex Jones. A little story: Alex Jones used to live beside Hugh, owned property beside Hugh in Tennessee. Alex Jones knows Hugh Squire. Alex Jones does not tell the truth of Hugh Squire. And yet Hugh Squire is right in the middle of everything that has happened from JFK to 9/11. And still to this day. Now, Alex Jones knows that Hugh Squire used to work for Mr. Christensen. Now, I thought Hugh said J.C. Christensen. It says R.C. Christensen on the website, and I think it might even say that on the monument. So it's, either I misunderstood or, maybe they're talking about two different people. I'm not sure. But either R.C. or J.C. Christensen, whichever it is, Hugh used to work for him. And they together worked in auto manufacturing and developed a lot of the machinery and the electronics that automated much of the assembly lines for most auto manufacturing in America. And Hugh Squires invented many of the machines that are used in there for J.C. Christensen, including what has ultimately been stolen from him and turned into a separate invention and patented separately, was a stud finder that he invented. Hugh actually invented the stud finder. It was just something that he was using with his machinery, and somebody took his idea, patented it, and made millions of dollars. Well, Hugh was just an employee of Christensen, but knew him personally and made Christensen a whole lot of money, which he used to create the Georgia Guidestones. Knowing him personally, he had talked to him about those Guidestones, and he knew that the Guidestones were talking about a earth-friendly, derived from an Indian tribe of some sort, or maybe a vaguely religious, in Indian religious language. It had nothing to do whatsoever with New World Order, with Illuminati, with Freemasonry. And he may or may not have been a Freemason. I don't know. I never asked. But it wasn't about what Alex Jones said it was. A first-hand account is infinitely more valuable than all these other people lying to you, just carrying on what Alex Jones said, when Alex Jones continues to lie about the truth of Hugh Squire every day of his life. Then we talk about Jesse Ventura, another so-called truther. And Jesse Ventura works for Russian television now. Go check it out. Google it. He has a show on Russian TV, RT, Russian TV. They call it RT. Jesse Ventura, the former governor of Minnesota, has moved himself to Mexico. I wonder why. Because Russian TV has at least one reporter named Sean Davis who runs campaigns on the internet for Rand Paul. I was chatting with him because Hugh told me about him recently. And we were asking him why he's not telling the truth anymore about his associations with Rand Paul and his associations with Russia. He lives now in Australia, but he likes to come around at election time and help Rand Paul. This is proof that Russian TV in Russia is influencing elections in the United States. And yes, Hugh does flag the FBI in all of his posts and has brought this to the attention of the FBI. However, the FBI has a habit of ignoring Hugh and hanging up on him because they know who Hugh is and they will not take reports from him. But if you'd like to file an FBI report, go for it. Then we think of, you think your country is a good thing and you think Trump is a good guy. Think about the head of the FBI, Osborne, Sex Crimes Division, not the whole FBI. But the Sex Crimes Division is now headed by Osborne. The Osborne family is the family like Ozzy Osbourne, but it's also the family that runs the Detroit radio. And remember, he was from Detroit, and he was abducted by the Osbournes and the families of 5 governors and musicians like Daryl Hall, who would torture him, chain him to a toilet, hang him in nets naked. Happened several times. His mother found him and rescued him one time. And that's who's running your sex crimes division of the FBI. And you don't think Trump knows this? Oh, Epstein died in prison, didn't he? Well, what is the credibility of Hugh's story? Did you know Hugh has a key to the same mansion that Epstein was conducting his business in? And where was it? The Virgin Islands or wherever it was, whatever island that was. Hugh has a key there because a lot of musicians would give him things and give him houses and places around the world because he was their publisher, made them a lot of money. And Michael Jackson had given him a key. Think Hugh might know a little bit about this? Yeah. So Donald Trump or Attorney General Barr, or both of them, off Epstein in prison. And one of their victims was Hugh Squire, who was used as a sex slave for them for decades. Isn't that interesting? Can you tie all that together? And then Osborne is appointed to run the sex crimes division of the FBI. Gee, I wonder why Epstein died in prison. Is it really that hard to see, America? It is if you believe people like Alex Jones and Julian Assange and Jesse Ventura. You'll never hear the truth from them. Or somebody like Rush Limbaugh, who used to sell drugs. and whose drug selling activities resulted in the murder of little children. Some of those drugs were being run through Hughes' property, and he stopped the drugs from being the drug ring. One of those people was at least three of those people were CIA agents. Two of them were framed for the Oklahoma City bombing after they were stopped for their drug activity. The third one started the QAnon movement. Isn't that interesting? And you think the truth comes from QAnon. And I'm not going to give you his name because you asked me not to. But I know who it is. So that's the reality of your truthers, America. That's your Alex Jones. That's your Rush Limbaugh. That's your QAnon. That's your Jesse Ventura. And then you have Donald Trump. Donald Trump stole $25 billion from United States banks. Not from foreign banks, from American banks, from U.S. banks, from people related to Hugh. And where did he build this? What did he do with it? He built things in Russia. Built a Trump Tower in Russia. So that money is very well known and understood where it is by Russia and by Putin. So when you go bankrupt in America, you don't have to repay the loan and you still have assets around the world. Do you see how that works? We know that Donald Trump has Russian mafia ties because I've given you the story before about the Rodin massacre here in Ohio, where they killed 8 people in 4 locations on the same day, 2 in each location, where they were taken and shot in the back of the head, execution style, in Piketon County, Ohio, near the uranium enrichment facility. Remember that Ukraine, which sounds like uranium, not coincidentally, is where they enrich uranium in the former Soviet Union. Of course, Putin pretends he wants it back, but, does he really? His hands in the cookie jar there in the Ukraine, just like Trump. So these 8 people were murdered in Ohio to send a signal to John Kasich in 2016 that we don't want you running from Ohio because we know your hand's not in the cookie jar. So we're going to send a clear signal so you can see just who we are and our connections. We're going to kill 8 people right there near the uranium enrichment facility so you can see what's going on. Implication, guess who's next if you don't get out of the race, Mr. Kasich? Oh, and Kasich got the idea, and a week later he was out of the race. Hi, Karen. Hi, Caleb. Hi, John. Now, Trump has committed crimes. You say, whoa, hold on, wait a minute. Don't mention those crimes because, listen, if anything happens to Trump, then we might end up getting Nancy Pelosi for president. You understand that just how bad of things Trump is involved in right now after what I just said? He stole $25 billion from U.S. banks and then was bailed out by German banks. Oh, he pays back the German banks, but the $25 billion that he stole from U.S. banks is in Russia, where his Russian mafia helps him become president, which we have proof of through the Rodin murders in Ohio. I have no idea what your name is, my friend. I don't speak that language, but how you doing? Someone just joined on there. Now, We know now that Trump stole $25 billion from U.S. banks. He has Russian mafia ties, and he has his hand in the Ukrainian cookie jar, just like the rest of them. What happened was, let me explain how it works. We're taxed as U.S. citizens. We give our money to the Ukraine, and then all of our politicians go and collect that money for themselves with the help of the Russian and Ukrainian mafias, as you can see through the connections like the Piketon Uranium Enrichment Facility in Piketon, Ohio. How do you think they got here? Yeah, through the uranium connections. Okay. Probably through this Uranium One case that's going on, perhaps. All of them have their hands in the Ukrainian cookie jar. All of our politicians do. So when Trump goes over and threatens to take money away from the Ukraine and inspires these so-called impeachment charges, what is he really doing? Trump is trying to get some of that money that is going to others for himself. Trump did not stop being a thief because he became president. Remember, he's already stolen $25 billion from American banks. That he's in league with the German banks. Oh, and where do the Germans keep all their money? Oh, in Swiss bank accounts. Where do you think Trump's real money is? Oh, yeah, in Swiss bank accounts. Where do you think they keep the payola that all of our politicians are collecting from the Ukraine? Oh, in Swiss bank accounts. Why do you think that that Hitler didn't bomb Switzerland? Yeah, because it would have destroyed everything he had. Okay, all of his funding and money was there too. Even Hitler didn't bomb Switzerland. Switzerland is the eye of the hurricane of the whole world. Everything spins around Switzerland. Nancy Pelosi's son, Paul Pelosi, is collecting payola, graft and payola through the Ukraine. Rand Paul's people, like we're talking about already, he's in with Sean Davis and Russian television, just like Jesse Ventura. These are your so-called truthers. What do you think? Why do you think they're in with the Russians? Well, I know this from back in the 60s, I believe it was. Bottom Line, which was started by Hugh Squire, where all musicians get their start in this country, was sold out. The trademark was sold out to the Russians by Hugh Squire's business manager for Bottom Line. And guess what his name was? Paul Paul. Is he related to Rand Paul and Ron Paul? Probably. What do you think, based on all these Russian connections? So Rand Paul's people are there. John Kerry's people are in the Ukraine. And of course, Joe Biden gets $1.5 billion from China. A few days later, or a few weeks later, we find out, oh, the State Department says that China is no longer a currency manipulator. Well, what do you know? That's worth $1.5 billion, isn't it? And you have to understand, the Chinese, they don't think like you and I. To China, that's just everyday business. That's not bribing anybody or paying off anybody in their minds. That's just how you conduct business. You pay off people is a normal part of business for China. So they're getting their trade deals right after that. They got their currency being declared by the State Department as no longer being manipulated by the government, which of course they did not enact any changes to their currency policy. They're still very much manipulating their currency. So it's all a fraud. Every last bit of it. All of those people are collecting our tax money into Ukraine, hundreds of billions of dollars. So when Trump says, oh, I'm not going to give any more money to the Ukraine, all of a sudden he has to be impeached. Do you see why? You see why now? You see what impeachment is really about now? This is the whole thing. They're all pedophiles. All of them are pedophiles. Trump's married to a woman half his age. Okay, go back 40 years. He's a freaking pedophile. Okay, he's attracted to people much, much younger than him. Think about it. Now, they're all pedophiles. They're all in the same con together, and they're all working with Russia. So Trump did ask Putin to get the goods on Biden. That's why we see Trump threatening to take away money from the Ukraine, because they're working on the same thing together. Trump did commit that crime. That is an impeachable offense. And then Trump did something that no other president has done before in history, and that is refuse to cooperate with Congress and hand over documents that were subpoenaed from the House of Representatives. The House of Representatives has the power under the Constitution to impeach. Nixon, Johnson after Lincoln, that were impeached, even Bill Clinton cooperated with Congress and handed over the documents. Only President Trump has not done that. That is called treason. So, am I for Trump? No, I'm for myself. And saying these things against Trump does not mean that I am for Nancy Pelosi. Au contraire. If I'm against Trump, I'm 100,000 billion% against Obama, Biden, and Peter Buttigieg from South Bend. How much you want to bet that Donald Trump is paying that campaign to start or to function? Oh yeah, because if he ever got up there, imagine how laughable it would be that how Trump could play on that. Can you imagine? Can you imagine what the rest of the world's thinking right now, that Americans are so freaking stupid that they actually are considering a guy for president whose name, he's gay, and his name is Peter Buttigieg from South Bend? Put it together. You don't see the con in that? Are you really that naive, America? You don't think that's a con? Now, so I've already given you what impeachment is about. Let's just briefly go into what Kobe Bryant's about. If you were to listen to somebody like Zach from Gematria Nader or something like that, you would think that it is a ritual, that it is the Illuminati or the Freemasons who killed Kobe Bryant, because there are numbers associated with Kobe Bryant. But let's look at the real facts. Kobe Bryant was in third place. Suddenly he drops to fourth place. They put that in the media multiple times for you to see, and all of a sudden he's in a plane wreck. We see from the cartoons that he was already told, somebody had already planned this helicopter wreck. So we've seen from the cartoons where he's already in a helicopter and being shown to crash. We know that it was planned in advance. But what is the ritual? What is the point? If you think it's just a ritual, why do the ritual? Just because people like numbers? Well, that's idiotic. Okay, Gematria historically is not a ritual thing. It's not about Freemasonry for the last 6,000 years. No. Gematria has been around in every language of antiquity for thousands of years. It's not about ritual. But murders are being done mathematically. So Kobe Bryant, whose number is 2-4, 2 doubled is 424. When you learn the truth of Hugh Squire, you understand that 4-4 is extremely, and 2-4 and 4-2 is extremely associated with his life. He's had 4 wives murdered. He was abducted as a 4-year-old. When this murder system that is being done mathematically was created for American ritual, it was done to reflect what they're doing to Hugh and the murders that they're doing around Hugh's life. You say, that sounds ridiculous. Why would they do that? Here's the reason. Why most of these people are dying, why most of the sports rituals, as you call them, they're not rituals, but why these things are being done. Hugh is the descendants of your presidents. He was being groomed to be your president. That's why he grew up where he did and is the offspring of some of the richest families in America. All this was stolen from him. He is not wealthy now. So what 9/11 was about was covering up the theft of all that they took from him. His heritage was stolen by his own brother. Hugh, though, overcoming the abuse of the pedophiles, fought back and became something and did some amazing things with his life. As I think he was 11 years old and the youngest person in history, he received all of his federal communications licenses, I believe. 11 years old. He was teaching college as a teenager to military people. Remember that he invented a lot of the things that made Christensen very, very wealthy in the automotive industry. When I tell you he's a savant, I'm telling you, you got a calculator with gematrinator.com. He doesn't need the calculator. He can just tell you all the numbers. He can say all the letters and make them match in his head, lists of them, and not just single words, not 3-letter words, no, entire phrases without the calculator. And he could do a long string of them immediately in his head and make them all match perfectly. I've seen him do it. Okay? You're talking about a smart guy. People that dismiss Hugh do not have any idea what they're talking about. These rituals are used to mark Hugh. These murders are about how they stole everything from him. He was a big publisher for Bottom Line. Bottom Line was stolen, and it had 28,000 music contracts associated with it. One song can be worth $80 to $120 million. One song. That was back in the 80s. I can't imagine how much they're worth now. Imagine 28,000 contracts with unbelievable number of songs. Multiply that times how many songs. That's how much the value of what they stole from him was. And that doesn't even include the heritage that was stolen from him by his brother, from his rich family members. Now, Hugh tried to get that back and had a case in the Pentagon. The Pentagon case, the civil rights case, was blown up on 9/11. They have been marking everything that they've done. All this stuff that they planned all these years ago back in the 60s are all related to Hugh. When you see that he died in a helicopter, try to remember that just a few months ago, was it? That McCormick, sometime last year, I guess it was longer than a few months, that McCormick was on the telephone with Hugh Squire when he crashed his helicopter. What did Kobe Bryant die in? A helicopter. When McCormick crashed his helicopter into the tower in New York City, he was on the phone with Hugh Squire. And Hugh shows me, and he'd show you too, the calls from him. You know, the record of the calls that was on his phone. Think about that for a minute. Yeah, it's related. That's how important Hugh's story is and why we need to get it out. This is why the premier of Kuwait offered him a television studio and said, if you come and live in Kuwait, you can tell your story as much as you want. The world knows this story. You don't know this story. Because Americans are kept in a box by truthers like Julian Assange, the pedophile, like Alex Jones, who sends child porn to the victims of Sandy Hook, like Jesse Ventura, who works for Russian television, like Osborne, the pedophile that runs the sex crimes division, or like Rush Limbaugh, the drug dealer. You see how it works now? So this is why Hugh's story is important and how it relates to all of this. If it's too much to get your head around, start studying it. Once again, why do I know these things? Because for the last 2 years, I've been doing that. Okay? And INTJ doesn't think he's the smartest person in the room. He thinks he's invested most of the mental energy of his mind into focusing and studying things. That's why they call it the mastermind personality. We're not we don't feel like we're smarter than anybody. We just feel like we take the time to invest our mental energy in the things we're interested in. We study things, we learn things. Okay? If you haven't done that, take our word for it and start diving in and learning. Hugh Squire is the reason Kobe Bryant died. He is the reason for 9/11. He is the reason that Jesse, daggone it, all of a sudden his name, I don't know why, every so often his name just goes out of my head. And I don't know why. It just does this every once in a while. Sometimes it's there and sometimes it's not. The Teamsters guy, Jimmy Hoffa. There we go. He's the reason Jimmy Hoffa was murdered. All of this and so much more. And go back and play this stuff over and over again until you really get it. And ask questions and dive into the study and ask Hugh questions. He's 66 years old and has cancer. He's not going to be around much longer. Get this story before Coast to Coast, which is like little vultures waiting on his property with Premier Network vans on his former property, just waiting for him to die. And he shows pictures of all the buses and vans that are waiting on his property, giving tours of the property on the Manning Ranch. Oh, Manning. Oh, by the way, which football player was just talked about recently? Eli Manning. Yeah, well, that's not a coincidence. That's so when you look up in history for the rest of eternity, you Google Manning, you get stuff like that instead of all the murders that happened on the Manning Ranch where Hugh lived and all the dead kids that they would throw on his property and the 4 wives that they murdered on his property. Well, 3 of the 4 on that property. This is the real deal. This is why Chris Barrickman, a Yale College professor that I put on my YouTube channel, if you just go on there, you'll hear him say something and you have to turn your speakers up real loud to hear it. That's why he says, listen to Hugh Squire. He's the real deal. Yeah, you need to listen and you need to get this and share it with the world. All the world, but especially Americans, because Americans are kept in a box by these fake truthers, all of whom are part of the pedo gangs and the drug dealers. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe.